ancestral house. They will camp around the tent of meeting. Now, reflecting on this verse, the great rabbi from about the year 1000, Rashi, says, as he quotes another midrash, each banner shall have a different sign, a piece of colored cloth hanging on it, the color of the one not being the same as the color of another. But the color of each tribe shall be like that of the stone that is fixed in the breastplate of the high priest. End quote. In other words, each ancestral house had its own distinct banner. And presumably the differing banners represent not only a difference in color, but perhaps a difference in family texture or culture. The beauty as encapsulated in this midrash that Rashi quotes is symbolized by the breastplate of the high priest. As the high priest would perform his duties, he would wear that plate of 12 precious stones, each one representing one of the tribes. Symbolically, then, he's engaged in the work of God while expressing the diversity that exists among the Israelites. And this balance is further reflected in the encampment. While the people face a common focal point, still their diversity around that central space is recognized and nurtured. And in the middle of the beauty of all that diversity, that glorious presence of God himself radiates from the very center of the camp. In effect, the nation is being reorganized from a nation of households to a national house, one that is protected, illuminated, the halotecha, as this week's parsha points out, and elevated, not so last week's portion, by God's very presence. It's part of the reality of the first of the parsha portions that was read to you tonight, that in the very presence of that campground was God as being as visibly seen by that tremendous cloud, the clouds of glory, that was resident over the Mishkan. And when it moved, we moved. And when it moved, Vayi ben Soa. We reminded ourselves, whenever the ark went forward, Moses would say, arise. And we did. And when it stopped, Uvnuko Yomar. When the ark rested, Moses would say, return, O Lord, to the myriads, the millions of Israel's families. Arise, O Lord, to your resting place. And as he did, we did also. That's the reality they experienced. The reality, as I said, that Balaam the prophet, the strange prophet, recognized so clearly and said, how goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel, how lovely are your tabernacles, O Lord of hosts. That's why my heart joyfully sings to the living God. Because I come into the place where your glory, your presence resides. Moreover, a couple hundred years after Rashi, the great rabbi, the Ramban, and Nachmanides, noted that there were some striking parallels between the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the Torah itself, and the revelation at Sinai experience. These comparisons or parallels suggested, as he points out, that the tabernacle, and later the temple and the synagogue, was to serve as a home for the presence of God that rested on Israel at Sinai. By making the tabernacle central to the nation, not only geographically, but now also conceptually, listen carefully, the people would keep Mount Sinai and that experience among themselves always. In other words, they would be able to experience a perpetual Shavuot. And if you were here Tuesday night, you understand, and if you weren't, catch us on YouTube. You get the picture. Just as they had surrounded the mountain longing for closeness to God, they would encamp around the tabernacle, the Mishkan, symbolizing that their very existence was predicated on their closeness to the God who gave them the Torah at Shavuot. And that then brings us back to the central image standing behind Sinai, the mountain, and Sinai, the wilderness. The central image, as was reinforced as we celebrated Shavuot, wedding and honeymoon. At which point some of you may be saying, wedding and honeymoon? Yeah, wedding and honeymoon. Shavuot always falls at the beginning of the reading of Numbers. So it's as if, as the rabbis understood these texts correctly, we reach the book of Numbers, and Numbers implies that the guests have been counted, hence the numbering. Everyone is seated in his or her proper place or order, hence the arrangement of the camps. And since that has taken place, the wedding can begin. And remember, our Sephardi brothers and sisters and our North African brothers and sisters, in fact, incorporate these wedding customs as we did in their celebration of Shavuot. The wedding can begin. In other words, it's time for Shavuot. And what happens after a wedding, friends? A honeymoon, of course. In the wilderness? Yes, in the wilderness. Which is why Jeremiah 2 quotes God as saying that he courted us in the wilderness. It was his honeymoon experience with us. Interestingly, the first reading from the book of Numbers, the first week we read from it, the Haftorah is Hosea chapter 2, verses 19 and 20. It's a reflection as we lay or wrap the tefillin. It's that text that says, I will betroth you to me in loving kindness and mercy and compassion and faithfulness and justice and love forever. It sets the stage for the honeymoon experience. The experience where our shoes and our clothes did not wear out, as Deuteronomy 29 reminds us. And as the Midrash that I shared with you just a few moments ago reminded us, where we were treated, or our ancestors were treated royally as his queen by the great king. By the way, on Shavuot, one thing people usually do in Israel is to enjoy food from the new crop harvests in Israel. And the reason for that is to remember his royal generosity and his loving faithfulness to us as a people during that honeymoon experience. So the Exodus and Sinai, let me suggest, as others have, are two pillars of Jewish peoplehood. The Exodus pictures Jewish community. Sinai reminds us of Jewish identity. Jewish community is tribal. Jewish identity is covenantal. And the covenant-making and covenant-keeping king is at the core of it all, the very focus of our attention, as our text reminds us tonight, as it was in Sinai, the wilderness. Therefore, it's a time of blessing. And this blessing is pictured and reinforced by last week's parashah. It's the text that speaks of what's called the Aaronic benediction, and you know the text, and if you've forgotten it, in just a few moments, you'll hear it as part of the blessing. Now, at first glance, this text seems like a nice little blessing. But behind it, we need to ask the question, what does it mean? In Numbers chapter 6, verse 24, God is being asked by the priests to physically protect each and every person, as well as every family in the nation. And in fact, the Hebrew term used there is shamor, which is the same word that describes God in the Psalms in that text we're familiar with. He that watches over Israel, that's the same word. Neither slumbers nor sleeps. And then verses 25 and 26 are requests from the priests for God to pay attention to the needs of the people of Israel, to the needs that we have. You see, those phrases, to shine his face or to lift up his face on us, are both ancient Hebrew idioms for seeing and paying favorable attention to someone. If one lifted up his face towards someone else, it meant that that person saw the other person and paid attention to him or to her. So verses 25 and 26 are requests from the priests to God, asking that he grant his favor and his peace for the entire nation. The Hebrew term, by the way, chen, for favor, is the term that's often used for God's graciousness or his generosity. And of course, you know the term for peace, shalom. And we are reminded that in the wilderness, God physically protected his people, paid attention to their situation, showered the people with repeated and regular acts of kindness, and gave the entire nation peace.